The glass pot shattered against the linoleum like a gunshot, sending hot coffee and shards of Pyrex skittering across the checkered floor. That sound, the sharp crack of irreversible consequence, is the only thing that cut through the laughter of three boys who thought the world belonged to them because their fathers owned the dealerships in town. I watched the steam rise from the mess. I watched the manager's face turn the color of wet dough, but mostly I watched Roxanne's hand. It was trembling, not with fear, but with the terrifying electric charge of rage that has nowhere left to go. She hadn't just dropped the pot, she'd thrown it, and now the silence in the diner was heavier than the humid air outside. We call it the Ghost Run. It's a stretch of Highway 9 that cuts through the belly of the state, bypassing the interstates where the stadies like to hunt. It's 2 lanes of cracked asphalt, heat shimmer, and places like Sal's Diner, establishments that stopped trying to impress anyone around the time Reagan left office. I was sitting in the back booth, nursing a black coffee that tasted like battery acid and burnt chicory. I'm the sergeant-at-arms for the Iron Saints MC. My road name is Crow. I earned it because I pick clean the messes others leave behind, and I've got a habit of showing up right before things die. I wasn't supposed to be alone. We were on a scattered run, heading back to the clubhouse in erratic groups after burying Dutch, a brother who'd wrapped his softail around a telephone pole 3 days prior. The club was mourning, which meant the club was drinking, riding hard, and looking for trouble. I'd hung back to sweep the rear, making sure no stragglers broke down. That's how I found Gus. Gus was a legend, one of the first 9, a man who rode a rigid-frame panhead when most of these new kids were still swimming in their father's nutsacks. But the road is cruel, and time is crueler. Parkinson's had taken his hands. Dementia was starting to take his map. He shouldn't have been riding solo. He shouldn't have been riding at all. But try telling a man who's breathed exhaust for 50 years that he has to sit in a rocking chair. He'd slipped away from the pack, confused, and ended up here at Sal's Diner. I'd walked in 5 minutes prior to the coffee pot incident. I saw Gus sitting at the counter, staring at a menu he couldn't read, his hand shaking so bad the sugar dispenser rattled against the napkin holder. Then the varsity jackets walked in, 3 of them, loud high school football stars, smelling of cheap body spray and entitlement. They saw an old man in dirty leathers, drooling a little, confused. They didn't see a human being. They saw a target. One of them, a blonde kid with a jawline bought by orthodontics, flicked Gus's ear. "Hey, Pops, you asleep, or you just dead already?" Gus flinched. He looked around, panic setting in. He didn't know where he was. He mumbled something about the voltage regulator on his bike. The second kid kicked the stool. "He's drunk, look at him, drunk old bum." I was already moving. My boots hit the floor with a heavy thud, but I'm 45 years old and my knees are shot. I wasn't fast enough. Roxanne was. She was behind the counter, a woman who looked like she'd lived 3 lifetimes, all of them hard. She had gray streaks in her hair she didn't bother to dye, and lines around her mouth that came from biting back screams. She'd been invisible to these kids until the moment she wasn't. "Leave 'em alone," she said. Her voice was sandpaper. "Relax, sweetie," the blonde kid sneered. "Just having some fun with the trash." He grabbed Gus's cut, the leather vest with the patches that are holy to us. He yanked it. Gus nearly toppled over. That's when the pot flew. It missed the kid's head by an inch and exploded against the counter edge. Scalding coffee splashed the kid's expensive varsity jacket. He screamed like he'd been gutted. Then came the manager, Sal, a little man with a mustache that looked like a mistake. "Roxanne, what the hell are you doing?" "They're assaulting a customer, Sal," she said, her chest heaving. "They're Mr. Henderson's boys," Sal yelled. He looked at the kids, then at Roxanne. He did the math in his head, the math of small-town politics versus minimum wage loyalty. "Get your stuff. You're done. Get out." "He's sick, Sal. Look at him." She pointed to Gus, who was weeping silently now, the confusion breaking him down. "I don't care. You assaulted a minor. You're fired now." I stopped halfway to the counter. The violence in my blood cooled instantly, replaced by something colder, sharper, a tactical assessment. I could break these kids. I could break Sal, but that wouldn't fix what just happened. That wouldn't balance the scales. You ever noticed how the worst decisions always look like loyalty at the time? If you've been there, you know what comes next. You convince yourself that taking the high road is for people who can afford the tolls. But sometimes, standing still requires more strength than throwing a punch. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway leading to the restrooms. I needed to make a phone call. I watched from the window as Roxanne walked out the back door. She carried a cardboard box with a potted plant and a spare pair of sneakers. She walked to a beat-up Honda Civic that was more rust than paint. She didn't cry. She lit a cigarette, her hand still shaking, and leaned against the hood. Inside, the kids were laughing again, wiping coffee off their jackets, high-fiving Sal. They felt like kings. They had slain the dragon, a middle-aged waitress making $2.13 an hour. I walked over to Gus. He was staring at the puddle of coffee. "Gus," I said softly. He looked up. His eyes were milky, terrified. "Crow? Is that Crow?" "Yeah, brother, it's me. I got lost, Crow. The road, it changed on me." "I know, it happens." I put a hand on his shoulder. The leather was worn smooth, just like him. "Come on, let's go outside." I guided him out. As we passed the booth with the kids, the blonde one spoke up. "Take your trash with you, buddy." I stopped. I looked at him. I didn't scowl. I didn't posture. I just looked at him with the dead-eyed stare of a man who has buried more friends than he has left alive. "Enjoy your meal. It's going to be a long afternoon." Outside, the heat hit us. I sat Gus down on the curb next to his panhead. The bike was a beauty, even if the rider was fading. I checked his tank. Full. Roxanne was still by her car. She looked at us. She took a long drag of her cigarette and flicked the butt into the gravel. "Is he okay?" she asked. Not, "I just lost my job." Not, "Who are you people?" Just, "Is he okay?" "He's having a bad day," I said. "You didn't have to do that." She laughed, a dry, cracking sound. "Yeah, I did. My old man had Parkinson's, died 2 years ago. I know the look." She gestured at the diner. "Sal's a coward, always has been. I was 2 months behind in rent, though. That part stings." "You got a name?" "Roxanne." "I'm Crow. This is Gus." "Well, Crow, you better get Gus home. He shouldn't be out here." "We're waiting on a ride," I said. "Tow truck?" I looked at my phone. The message I had sent to the group chat was simple. "Code black at Sal's Diner on Route 9. Civilian fired for protecting a First Nine member. Hostiles on site. Bring the thunder." "Something like that," I said. The thing about the Brotherhood is that people get it wrong. They think it's about crime or drugs or being tough guys. And sure, for some clubs, that's all it is. But for the Iron Saints, it's about being the family that the world threw away. We are the orphans of the American dream. We are the guys who worked the assembly lines until they moved to Mexico. We are the veterans who came back to a country that didn't want to look at us. We found each other in the noise of V-twin engines. And the one rule, the only rule that matters, is that you protect the patch. Gus was the patch. He designed the original cut back in '78. Disrespecting him wasn't just bullying an old man, it was spitting on the altar. And Roxanne? She was a civilian, yeah, but she stepped into the line of fire for one of ours when she had zero protection. In the bylaws of the street, that makes her blood. 30 minutes passed. The kids inside were still there, probably waiting for their parents or just loitering to prove they owned the place. Sal was wiping down the counter, trying to ignore the tension radiating from the parking lot. Then the vibration started. It wasn't a sound at first, it was a feeling in the soles of your boots. The gravel on the ground began to dance. The coffee in the cups inside the diner would be rippling like the water in Jurassic Park. Roxanne looked up. Is that thunder?" "No," I said. "That's the cavalry." It started as a low drone, a hornet's nest kicked over in the distance. Then it grew into a roar, a deep, chest-thumping bass note that drowned out the highway traffic. The first bikes crested the hill. 2 glides, black on black. Then 4, then 20. They weren't just Iron Saints. I'd sent the call to the coalition. We had guys from the Devil's Disciplines, the Void Runners, independent riders who knew Gus. They were coming from the funeral, already dressed in their Sunday best, clean cuts, polished chrome, black armbands. They didn't park neatly. They swarmed. They filled the parking lot, then the shoulder of the highway, then the median. Engines revved, a cacophony of American steel screaming at the sky. The smell of unburned fuel and exhaust choked the air. Roxanne's eyes went wide. She pressed her back against her rusty Honda. "Oh my God!" "Stay close to me," I told her. I walked to the lead bike. Preacher, our president, kicked his kickstand down. He's a big man, built like a brick shithouse that learned how to punch. He took off his helmet. His eyes were red from the funeral, which only made him look more terrifying. "Where is he?" Preacher asked. I pointed to Gus, who was sitting on the curb, smiling now. The sound of the engine soothed him. It was the only lullaby he knew. "And the girl?" I pointed to Roxanne. Preacher looked her up and down. He nodded. "And the problem?" I pointed to the diner. Preacher signaled. The engines cut. 500 bikes went silent at once. The quiet was louder than the noise. We all pretend we're one thing while being another. Some of us just do it at 90 miles per hour. Maybe you know what I mean. You put on the costume, the suit and tie, the uniform, the leather vest, hoping it tells the world who you are. But the truth is in what you do when the costume doesn't protect you. Roxanne didn't have a costume. She just had a tire iron of a spine. Preacher walked up to Roxanne. 500 hardened men watched. "You stuck your neck out for Gus?" Preacher asked. His voice carried. Roxanne straightened up. She crossed her arms. "He was being bullied. I don't like bullies." "Cost you your job." "It was a shitty job." Preacher cracked a smile. It was a rare thing, like a flower growing in concrete. He turned to the diner. "Let's go have a chat." We walked in. Not all 500. The building would have collapsed. Just the officers. Preacher, me, Tiny, and Knuckles. The bell on the door jingled, a cheerful sound for a funeral procession. Sal was behind the counter. He looked like he was trying to phase through the wall. The 3 varsity kids were in the booth, their mouths open. They looked out the window and saw a sea of leather and denim surrounding their world. Preacher sat on a stool. He spun it slowly. "Service in this place is terrible. I hear you fired the only decent employee you had." Sal stammered. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I can call the police." Preacher laughed. "Call him. Sheriff Miller rides a Road King. He's in the parking lot right now." That was the moment Sal broke. The illusion of his authority, the idea that the rules of his little diner superseded the respect of laws, evaporated. Preacher turned to the boys. The blonde kid was trembling. "You like picking on old men?" Preacher asked. He didn't yell. He sounded curious. "I was just joking," the kid squeaked. "Joking," Preacher repeated. See, the man you pushed, that's Gus. He earned a Silver Star in Vietnam. He built this club from the dirt up. He's forgotten more about honor than you'll ever learn in your private school." Preacher stood up. He leaned in close to the kid. "You are going to walk out there. You're going to apologize to him, and then you're going to apologize to the lady. And if I ever hear that you even looked at someone sideways in this town, I will have 500 uncles paying you a visit. Do we understand each other?" The kid nodded so fast I thought his head would detach. They walked out. It was the longest walk of their lives. The gauntlet of bikers parted just enough to let them through. They mumbled their apologies to Gus, who just patted their hands like they were confused grandchildren. They apologized to Roxanne, avoiding her eyes. Then they got in their expensive SUVs and drove away, very slowly. But we weren't done with Sal. Preacher turned back to the counter. "Now about this job opening. I can hire her back right now. Raise, I'll give her a raise." Roxanne had followed us in. She stood in the doorway, framed by the sunlight and the chrome. "No," she said. We all looked at her. "I don't want to work for you, Sal. I don't want your money. You stood there and watched. You're worse than the kids." Sal looked at the floor. Preacher nodded. "Fair enough." He reached into his vest. He pulled out a roll of cash, club funds, usually reserved for bail or burials. He peeled off a stack of hundreds. He slammed it on the counter. "This is for the damage to the coffee pot and for the coffee." Then he turned to Roxanne. "We got a clubhouse about 20 miles north. We got a bar. We got a kitchen. The food sucks because Knuckles cooks it." "Hey," Knuckles protested. "We need someone who can run the front of house, keep the books, manage the bar, keep these idiots in line. Pays better than this dump. Full benefits, which means if you get sick, we pay for it. And nobody disrespects you." Roxanne looked at the money. Then she looked at the bikers outside. She looked at Gus, who was being helped onto a sidecar by two prospects. "I can't ride a bike," she said. "We'll teach you," I said. She looked at Sal one last time. "I'm taking my plant." We rode out in formation. Roxanne rode on the back of my bike until we could get her car sorted. She held on tight, her helmet pressing against my back. The vibration of the engine feels different when you're part of the pack. When you're alone, it's just noise. When you're with 500 brothers, it's a heartbeat. It resonates in your chest, overrides the anxiety, the bills, the loneliness. We didn't fix the world that day. Gus still had Parkinson's. He was still gonna fade away, bit by bit. The rich kids were still rich, and Sal was still a coward. Violence didn't solve the underlying rot of a society that discards its elderly and mocks the working poor. But for one afternoon, on a stretch of cracked highway, we balanced the books. We arrived at the clubhouse as the sun was setting, turning the chrome into liquid gold. We got Roxanne set up. She took charge of the bar within an hour, telling Tiny to stop leaning on the taps. Later that night, I went outside to smoke. Gus was sitting on the porch, a blanket over his legs. He was having a lucid moment. "Grow," he rasped. "Yeah, Gus? That girl, the one with the coffee pot. Roxanne. Yeah, she's got fire, good fire." He paused, his hand trembling on the armrest. "I was scared, Crow. In the diner, I didn't know where I was. I know, brother. I don't want to be scared." "You got 500 brothers, Gus. You ain't gotta be scared." He looked at me, his eyes clear for a fleeting second. "We're all scared, Crow. We just make enough noise so we can't hear it." He was right. That's the secret. The leather, the loud pipes, the swagger, it's all just a way to scream into the void so the void doesn't scream back. But today, a waitress with nothing to lose showed us that sometimes the quietest act of courage screams the loudest. The road doesn't care about your reasons, only your choices. And sometimes the heaviest thing we carry isn't the regret over what we did, it's the weight of what we didn't do. If you've got a story like that, you're not alone on this road. I flicked my cigarette into the dark, listened to the laughter coming from inside the clubhouse, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to run.